The essence of fantasy football or any fantasy sport draft is not to overdraft or reach for players. This means not to value a player beyond a draft round where an equivalent player can be drafted. To make this clear, if we say round 1 is worth $10 and round 2 is worth $9, round 3 is worth $8, and so on, then drafting player A at value $9 where an equivalent player can be drafted at $7 is overdrafting, or a loss of $2. These dollars accumulate and what destroy the value of fantasy teams, hence making them lose. We determine the value of the rounds arbitrarily speaking, but how do we determine the value of the players of each round? Through simple statistical analysis of player fantasy projections for the upcoming season, 2010, which are found all over the web and generally do not deviate. By calculating the variance of the top 10 players for each position, we can appropriately draft for the first 4 rounds, which are the most valuable rounds in the whole draft because they're not subjected to as many uncertainties as players outside of the top 10, meaning we can approach this in a more scientific manner since there's less uncertainty. Variance, statistically speaking, shows variability. A higher variance score means higher variability amongst the sample. The positions with the greatest variability in the top 10 are, in descending order, running back, quarterback, tight end, wide receiver. This means the top 3 to 5 running backs will score much more points than the bottom 3 to 5 running backs in that top 10 sample, and so on for each position. But this also means that, relative to other positions, the top wide receiver is equivalent to the top 10th wide receiver, which has huge implications for avoiding overdrafting. First, assuming a non-PPR league, points per reception league, and a Yahoo default format, though this point will make no difference if you use ESPN, do not ever draft a wide receiver in the first round, ever. This is, of course, because the number 10 wide receiver can be drafted 2 rounds later. You've essentially deflated your number 1 pick. I should also add that I'm speaking for a 12-team league. Instead, if the top 5 running backs have been drafted, take the first quarterback or second quarterback if the first one's already been drafted, which means take Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees, whichever one's available. Why not top 10 running back, i.e. bottom 5 top 10 running back? Because you can grab the same running back in the second round based on your draft position. And quarterback variability means if you pass on the top QBs and people draft them, the ones that will be available will be less valuable, much less valuable. And this is, again, the whole principle behind this drafting strategy, this drafting technique, to draft based on value. And again, even in the second round, do not draft a wide receiver because you can most likely get the same one in the third round. Now, what to do in the second round if you draft in the top 5? Surprisingly, go to wide receiver. The remaining running backs can be purchased at an equivalent price in the 4th round, yet the top 10 wide receivers will be gone. And to clarify, when I meant drafting top 5, I meant I am assuming that you're going to pick up a wide running back, based on the context of this discussion. For your 3rd round pick, I recommend another top 10 wide receiver, and then running back in the 4th, tight end in the 5th, quarterback in the 6th, so on. On the flip side, drafting a quarterback first and then running back in the 2nd, you're left with no choice but to take a wide receiver in the 3rd round, because that's your last chance to get a top 10 productive wide receiver, which is optimizing the value of your team by doing so. Also, you'll most likely want to take a running back in the 4th because you will have a late 5th round pick, and you're essentially risking losing that value because if that second tier of running backs are gone between 11th and 20th, then you're practically screwed for a second running back. You're left with just basically, a backup as your starting second running back. Now, what happens if both the top 5 running backs are gone and the top quarterbacks have been taken? Go running back, back to back to get yourself 2 top 10 running backs, albeit bottom half top 10 running backs, but they're still top 10 nonetheless, because the available quarterback value will be there in the 3rd round. This of course, to reiterate, if you were to draft a quarterback at any of those two spots, you'd be able to draft an equivalent quarterback 2 rounds later, thus making your choice pretty limited to go running back. This makes your following selections much more open-ended, however. You can go quarterback in the 3rd, and then and then tight end in the 4th, get a top tight end, or you can go wide receiver, and then maybe hope for a quarterback in the 4th, or maybe another wide receiver. I recommend wide receiver because the value drops in the 4th round. But what about the tight ends? Speaking of tight ends, no offense to them, but when they're drafted, it's dependent on their position, simply because the top tight end scores like a low top 10 wide receiver. That's their ceiling. And so I only consider them in the 4th round after that quarterback choice, because the equivalent wide receivers, if all top 10 of wide receivers have been drafted already, the equivalent wide receivers can be picked up even into the 6th round. So they're not worth it. So in conclusion, the first 4 rounds, I would say even the first 5 rounds of fantasy draft is a science, and that's the science of avoiding overdrafting. And so long as you avoid overdrafting, and you let you let your opponents do that, you're gonna make the playoffs easily. You're gonna make even the finals. It's as simple as that, because most people don't really use this strategy, or don't know how to deploy the strategy. So use this, and you'll finish in the top 3, at the very least. Thank you.